In today's video, I'm going to teach you how to sort a pivot table in Google Sheets. If you're working with a pivot table, sorting is one of the easiest ways to make your data clearer and more useful. Whether you want to see values from highest to lowest, alphabetize categories, or organize column labels in a more readable way, Google Sheets makes the process pretty straightforward once you know where to look. To get started, open Google Sheets and go to the spreadsheet that contains your pivot table. Make sure you're on the sheet where the pivot table is already created, because the sorting options appear through the pivot table editor. Once you're there, click anywhere inside the pivot table itself. This is important because selecting the pivot table tells Google Sheets to open the pivot table editor on the right side of the screen. If you don't click inside the pivot table first, you may not see the options you need. In the pivot table editor, look for either the rows section or the columns section. Which one you use depends on what part of the pivot table you want to sort. If the items you want to organize appear down the left side of the table, you'll usually work in rows. If they appear across the top, you'll use columns instead. Taking a moment to identify the correct section will help you avoid sorting the wrong field. Next, click on Add in the appropriate section. This allows you to choose a field that will be used in that part of the pivot table. In other words, you're telling Google Sheets which category or label you want to display and then sort. After that, choose the field you want to sort. This should be the field that contains the row labels or column labels you want to organize. For example, it could be a list of names, product categories, dates, or another grouping used in your pivot table. Choosing the correct field is key because the sort behavior will follow that selection. Once the field is in place, select the sort order. This is where you decide how the pivot table should be arranged. Depending on your data, you may be able to sort in ascending order, descending order, or by a related value in the pivot table. If your results don't look the way you expected, double check that you selected the right field and the right section, either rows or columns, and that's it. By clicking inside the pivot table, using the pivot table editor, adding the correct field, and choosing the sort order, you can quickly organize your pivot table in Google Sheets and make your data much easier to read.